Hey guys, that mom here. So I have 3 rules that I generally try to live by all the time. You don't talk religion, you don't talk money, you don't talk politics with people. No matter what you have to say, you're going to end up making enemies. These are things that people just inherently disagree about all the time because people are different. So I know that I am taking a break from my regular topic, and I am also about to break 2 of my fundamental rules, but I am so upset and so insulted right now that I have to say something. I've never really been one to pay attention to politics. Maybe it was because I was young and naive and stupid and maybe I didn't care. Maybe it was because I really didn't feel like my voice mattered. Truth be told, I kind of feel like no matter what the politicians say on their campaign trails, it never pans out when they're in office. I don't think that there's a lot of truth to what they say. I think that they make a lot of promises not knowing what the job entails, and then when they're in office, they can't follow through. So I've just never really paid much attention. I've never really felt like I could make a difference. But since becoming a mom, I have decided that I needed to be more involved in these things. I needed to be more well educated. I needed to, even if I felt like my voice didn't matter, I needed to be educated on the issues and know the direction that our country was going. And so I have decided to start following the latest candidates, both Democrat and Republican, and watch the debates and educate myself. And I have been waiting for them to talk about student loans. Obviously, at this point, we're in October 2015. At this point, there have been now 3 Republican debates to 1 Democratic debate. So I have obviously watched more Republican debates than I have Democratic, just because there have been more of them. And the one thing that I keep waiting for them to talk about in these Republican debates are the student loans. And they finally talk about it today. And I was like, yay! The topic I have been waiting for has finally come up. Why have I been waiting for this topic, you might ask? Is because of all of the things that we are dealing with today, the one that plagues me personally the most in my every single day life would be student loans. I went to a great university. I loved my college experience. I got a degree in psychology and I loved it, and I was able to do really wonderful things. Of course, that resulted in me having $80,000 worth of debt by the time I graduated, and I'm one of the lucky ones because I only went to a university for 2 years. I took advantage of some of the services that were provided to me, and I got my 2-year degree, my AA degree, my associate's degree for free under some of the services that were provided. And so I only needed to continue on and get my bachelor's at a university level that I needed to take out student loans for 2 years. And for 2 years, I have $80,000 worth of debt that I've been paying for now 10 years. So you want to know what? That is what matters to me every single day. And I have been waiting for them to talk about it. And the day has finally come. I'm not really sure what his title is. I don't know if he's a senator or who he is, but Kasich is his last name, was asked about student loans and how over $100 billion is in loan default for student loans. Mind you, I've never defaulted on my student loans, but there are $100 billion in loan defaults. And what was his response? Well, at first, of course, he had the typical politician response where he didn't really talk about the current student loan situation. He talked about in the future and the things that they're going to do in Ohio to make things different. So some of the things that he talked about is how universities won't get a dime of their funding unless the students complete courses or graduate. He was kind of unclear what the requirement was. And that they were now offering what's called dual enrollment, where as a high school student, you can take college courses and get college credits while you are still a college student, and that's for free. And that's really great that they're implementing those things at Ohio, because guess what? 10 years ago, when I was in high school, 10 years ago, I graduated college. So it was 13 years ago when I was in high school, and I was considering college, I already had those things available to me. So dual enrollment existed when I was in high school, and I utilized my senior year of high school to get 1 year, 32 credit hours, I believe it was, 1 year of college completely free. I did it as dual enrollment. So instead of taking classes at my high school, I took classes at my local community college, and I got college credits for it. I then continued on and after graduation, and got my AA through the community college, because the financial aid that I qualified for in the state of Florida, which is where I lived at the time, would cover all of the tuition for me to get my AA degree at a community college. So I got my AA degree, my 2-year degree, completely free. So I'm glad Kasich is looking to do those things in Ohio. That's really fantastic, but those things existed at least 13 years ago in Florida. So, and I still have this problem. So obviously the fact they're implementing those things is not going to fix the problem for everyone. So then he talks about how he's doing these things, assuming for future generations, and that's fantastic. He finally gets to the part that matters to me, as far as the people who, like me, are already sitting on their student loans, and the people who have attributed to the $100 billion default. He says that we could start to work it off with public service. Here's the thing, I'm not against public service. As a matter of fact, that already exists. If you work for 10 years for a 501c3, you can have your student loans forgiven, and that's great. But what does he constitute as public service? Because I want to tell you a little bit about me, Mr. Kasich, if I can. I am 31 years old. I graduated from the University of Miami in 2006. I attended the University of Miami for 2 years, and in those 2 years, the student loans that I took out, in addition to the scholarships and grants that I had, in order to pay for my classes, to pay for my books, to pay for housing, to pay for meal plans, to pay for parking tickets, racked up to being $80,000 at the end of 2 years. I have not defaulted on those loans in the last 10 years. I make those payments religiously. I have them automatically debited from my account every month. So even if my electricity is not paid, even if my child has to go without food, my student loans are paid for. And you want to know why that is? Is because they're never going to fucking disappear. I have to pay them for the rest of my life because they will not disappear. I'm not as lucky as Donald Trump, and I can't just use the chapter laws, and I can't just use bankruptcy to work in my favor. I have no choice but to pay these student loans for the rest of my life. So I have not defaulted, because if I default, then my children will have to pay for them when I die, because they're never going to go anywhere. I graduated with honors. I had this big dream that I was going to be this high-priced lawyer, probably standing one day on the stage with you, and I was going to be making a world of difference on a big scale, and I was going to make tons of money, so it really didn't matter how much I took out in student loans. And maybe that's why I didn't really worry about it then. But you want to know what happened? In the last semester of my senior year, I was getting a psych degree, and this opportunity to get experience in the field came up, which is rare as an undergrad. There isn't much you can do in the field of psychology as an undergrad. So I decided to jump on it, and I met this little boy who had just turned 2. He was the cutest thing I'd ever seen, and to be quite honest with you, I didn't really like kids much at that age. You know, I was 20-something and not really interested in kids. And he was the cutest thing I'd ever seen, and he had autism. And I will never forget the day I sat at the dining table with his parents as they interviewed me to work with him and to help tutor him and to help him learn the things that he wasn't learning from his natural environment. And as terrified as I was, I didn't know much about autism. We're talking 10 years ago, before this was this huge epidemic. I decided I was going to do it, and I happened to be damn good at it. And so by the end of my college year, when I was graduating, I decided I wasn't going to pursue the whole law school thing or any of that. I wanted to help more children with autism. I took on 2 more kids that I worked with, brothers. They were adorable. I think they were 5 and 3 at the point when I worked with them. And I worked with them in addition to the 2-year-old. And I made drastic improvements in their life. And I continued just plugging away and plugging away and plugging away. And I worked with as many kids as I possibly could. At one point, I was working with over 7 kids. And you know what? I'm driving all over Miami. Which, if you've ever been to Miami, Mr. Kasich, I don't know if in Ohio you've ever been down to Miami. But I know Jeb Bush, you have been, and you weighed in on this a little bit at the debate. Miami's got a lot of traffic, so I'm sometimes sitting in an hour, hour and a half's worth of traffic, eating up all that gas, and I'm going and getting paid $10 an hour when I'm doing 2 or 3 hour sessions. So I'm driving an hour, hour and a half in traffic to make 20, 30 bucks, but it didn't matter because I was making a difference. And when I worked with these kids, I had kids who couldn't talk, who would say their first sounds and their first words with me. And I discovered that I could really make a difference. And no, I'm not standing on some presidential debate stage with you guys, but I really made a difference. And for 10 years, I have worked with children with autism. For 10 years, I have devoted my life, and I am not some high-priced attorney, and I think the most I've ever made, and this was after 10 years, this was the last year that I was working, so after 10 years, the most I ever made annually was $34,000, okay? I was not making a lot of money. I was not at all. I was barely surviving. I've had my electricity shut off. I have had eviction notices on my door. I've worn dirty clothes because I didn't have quarters to do laundry. But I was out there and I was changing lives. I was helping kids who otherwise wouldn't be able to do anything we take for granted. I am now a mother and I have a daughter who I get to sit and watch, and I see how much she learns from her environment. I watch her when I put a Cheerio on her high chair tray, how she just learns to use her 2 fingers to pick them up. I teach kids that who don't learn that. That's what I did for a living. I watch my daughter as she plays with her voice and as she makes sounds and as she just naturally does it and just comes to her. I teach kids that. That's what I did with that degree. And I didn't make nearly enough to be able to pay it off. So you want to know what? For the rest of my life, I took advantage of every forbearance that I was allowed to. I have extended my repayment as much as I can to get my payments as low as possible. I've reconsolidated as many of them as I can to get my interest rate as low as possible, because I was paying 10.25% on some of these student loans, so they were not low interest rates. I'm still now paying 7.5 on many of them that I'm not eligible to reconsolidate, because that's just the way these student loans work. And so you know what? I pay them every year. I was very lucky. I have met a wonderful man who, yes, has a good job. We are very firmly middle class, and I'm lucky that I don't have those struggles that I did. But you want to know where I'm really lucky? Is that this man has agreed to take on my nearly $1,000 monthly payment to the student loans every single month. And now I have a daughter, and I stay home with my daughter, and I'm no longer working with kids out in the field. I'm working with my own children. So almost to add insult to injury, I'm paying for a degree that I no longer get to use out in the field. And yes, obviously I could go and be a working mother, but why shouldn't I take what I've learned, and why shouldn't I take everything that I learned, not only from the school system, but from my years of working with children, and be able to pour them into my kids without feeling bad about it? Why should I have to tell my daughter that I'm sorry, mommy doesn't get to stay with you, and you have to go somewhere else because I have to work to pay student loans? And how the hell, may I just ask, am I supposed to, we're firmly middle class, okay? And Carly Figurino or Figuroli or whatever the hell her last name is, was just talking today about how the government should not provide retirement to people. And you want to know what? I can agree with that. That should be a company thing, and that's fine. But let me just ask you, how am I supposed to save for my retirement, save for my children's college fund so that they're not in the hellhole that I'm in, while still paying $1,000 a month, mind you, which is more than some people's mortgage payment for my college education? What are you going to do about that? So let me just ask you, Mr. Kasich, what the hell do you constitute as public service? Because for 10 fucking years, I have done public service. I have spent more, as a matter of fact, last year, which was the last year that I was working, I had a $700 loss. I spent more money out of my own pocket to continue working with these kids and making a difference than I made. And I can't remember who it was, but one of these business journals or something, I think, ranked ABA, that's what I did applied behavior analysis, ABA as being like the 6th most rewarding yet underpaid job. So let me just ask you, Mr. Kasich, what do you constitute as public service? I think you need to be a little bit more specific, because A, what you are suggesting already exists. I could go work for a 501c3 for 10 years and have my student loans forgiven. And if you are suggesting something different, then you need to be more specific, because I'm inclined to think that our servicemen, our teachers, by the way, have you met a teacher? Have you seen how much they spend out of pocket to get their classrooms? situated and suitable for our children every year. People who do ABA and who are helping children with autism, which is a rising epidemic today. These are all things that I'm sorry, I would constitute as a public service, even though they are for income. Because you want to know what? It's for such little income, it hardly makes a difference, especially when you're sitting on $80,000 worth of debt for 2 years. And then, Mr. Jeb Bush, I am sorry, but you have said Florida has the lowest in-state tuition. I had lived at that time in the state of Florida since I was 2 years old when I went to college. I was a state resident and I went to the University of Miami, which yes, I realize is a private university, but I still got to pay the in-state tuition. And I went for 2 years because I took advantage of some of the things that you had set up, things like dual enrollment. I got grants and I got scholarships and I still ended up graduating with $80,000 worth of debt. So you saying that this is something that the state should just take care of and wanting to brag about your record here in Florida, guess what? I'm a product of your record. I went to school in Florida with your low in-state tuitions, which should only go to tell you if my situation is this bad, heaven help the people all over the country who are in a similar situation, who apparently were not as blessed as I was to be under some of the things that you put in place when you were governor. So I am sorry, but this enrages me. Not only does this enrage me, because this was only one question, mind you, out of the entire debate. But do you want to know what they talked about immediately following? Kasich got to answer his one response. Jeb chimed in real quick and was just like, well, in Florida, we have the lowest in-state tuition. This is a state matter and the federal government shouldn't be a part of it. They then talked about fantasy fucking football. Are you kidding me? Here's the thing. I'm a fan of fantasy football. I play fantasy football, okay? I like it. It's not that I have anything against it. But how dare you? How dare you only give a minute and 30 seconds? Is that what you devoted to the student loan problem? And then you talked about fantasy fucking football like they're even in the same realm as being an epidemic that they are? We have over $100 billion in student loan defaults. And you're going to talk about fantasy fucking football? I am so incredibly insulted, and I'm reminded this evening why I don't pay attention to politics. Because you want to know what? That's disgusting. The first half of the debate was spent with, questions being asked where all the candidates should be attacking one another. And then they spend one question, a minute and 30 seconds, talking about the student loan epidemic when we have numbers the way that we do before they start talking about fantasy fucking football. I'm sorry, but I think that it's disgusting. I am a mother of a small child, and so I will continue to watch these debates and I will continue trying to educate myself and do my due diligence. But I'm sorry, Mr. Kasich, I want to know, what do you have to say to someone like me? What do you have to say to someone like me who sits here and for the rest of my life, do you want to know my repayment is scheduled to be finished paying off when I am 55 years old. I'm 31 currently. If I have my children the way that I plan and they are in my home until they go off to college and they leave, I'll be 52 when my children leave my home. So that means for the entire time that I have my children under my roof and I am paying for their care 100%, when they are 100% dependent on me, I will also be paying over nearly $1,000 a month in student loans. So I don't know how the hell I'm expected to have to save for their for their education. I don't know how I'm supposed to have Christmases, have birthdays, how we're supposed to be able to go on vacation or do any of the things that normal people do. How I'm supposed to even buy clothes for my kids when the season changes come. I'm not really sure how I'm supposed to do any of that, when for as long as my children will be living under my roof, I will have to be paying for my education. And I'd like to know if the 10 years that I devoted to helping numerous children learn to speak, eat, potty train, dress themselves, play, all of the things that you take for granted, or the things that you watch your own children do easily, I wonder if that would count as public service. And Jeb Bush, stop patting yourself on the back because I am a product of your system. So you want to know what? Y'all need to get back up on that stage, quit talking about fucking fantasy football, and talk about the real issue because you didn't fucking answer it. And that's why people don't watch the damn debates. And that's why people don't vote. It's because you guys don't answer fucking questions.